With no agent visit, no medical exam, no blood work, none of the stuff that makes life insurance a hassle. Go to ethosliferadio.com. That's ethosliferadio.com. Ethos Life Radio is a 100% online buying platform for life insurance powered by Ethos. We match you after a simple online interview with a life insurance policy that matches your needs at the best price. Ethosliferadio.com shops your policy to over 100 carriers instantly to get you the best price. And best of all, ethosliferadio.com is a marketplace. This is not a lead source. Your information will not just be sold with endless emails, calls, and texts. We give you the opportunity to buy life insurance online. Simple, in less than 15 minutes online, with no medical exam if you qualify. Do the right thing for your family today. Go to ethosliferadio.com. ethosliferadio.com.
A House subcommittee heard from 3 FBI whistleblowers on Thursday as Republicans argue
are we still
having
conversations or not?
Speaking on Fox and Friends, Florida Republican Congresswoman Kat Kamick says their claims need to be heard without political bias.
It was incredibly disappointing that our Democrat colleagues couldn't put party politics aside and listen to these 3 men who have put their careers, their families, their entire lives on the line for this country.
If you own a Ford or Lincoln SUV, take note as your vehicle may be involved in their latest recall.
If you own a fairly new Ford Explorer or Lincoln Aviator, listen up. A problem with rear view mirrors has prompted Ford to recall more than 420,000 of the SUVs.
Finally, I'm Sharice
Chavez. The problem with the vehicle's 360-degree rear cameras has resulted in 17 minor accidents. I'm Richard Johnson.
Bones from a mastodon are going to be on display this weekend at a Grand Rapids, Michigan public museum. After they were discovered last year just outside the city, museum science coordinator
door to door or over the phone to make them aware of how the candidates fall on those issues,
because we know how much interest there is, and that's fantastic. But we also want to set expectations, right? It's not the entire skeleton. We're not there yet.
Most of the skeleton is still drying, and it will take a year for it all to be displayed. For USA News, I'm Tim Berg.
Do
you have a story to tell? Bring your story to life with audiobooks. Great stories deserve great storytelling. Audiobook Network provides professional voice actors and full production services for every author's manuscript. From narration, production, and editing to distribution, promotion, and sales, Audiobook Network handles everything. If you have a print book, ebook, or even a manuscript, call Audiobook Network now and get our free audiobook guide. 800-734-1229. 800-734-1229.
The following is an America Matters media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of America Matters Media.
Vote for me and I'll set you free. Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose.
It's still Q&A, right? Can I?
Over me.
We got an engineer down below. Not the right engineer.
Welcome to America Matters Media. My name is Janice Hermson. I'm your host today, stepping in for Eddie Floyd. So we're glad to have you here. We are heard on 1060 AM, AUN TV, Salem Networks, and Radio for America. So we're glad you all joined us today. We have a very special guest with us that I'm going to turn this over to so that we get the benefit of all his knowledge. And his name is Joe Weaver. He is the director of Better Nevada PAC. So welcome, Joe.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with everybody today. Just wanted to give a little background on myself to start for those who don't know me. But I started in politics back in 2012. I'm a Carson City native. So I grew up, went to high school in Carson City. I went to UNR, worked on Heller in 12, helped out in 2016 with Rand Paul and switched over to DJT. Then I spent 2 years in the state of Michigan. I helped with the United States Senate candidate, John James, who ran the first time there. We were unfortunately unsuccessful in that race, but he is now a congressman, so I'm very happy to see that. Then I returned home in 2019 to run the statewide organization and campaign for Donald J. Trump for president. So I did all the rallies, OPA, White House field, offices. We had an office on 4th Street, that kind of stuff for the presidential reelect. And then I switched over last cycle to the national committee and ran the statewide operation for that. So I know a little bit earlier we were talking a little about what we could be doing better, where the party kind of fell a little bit short. Obviously, we were successful, and that's why I'm here today with Governor Joe Lombardo, the only statewide Republican to defeat an incumbent Democrat in the entire country by a very, very short amount of votes. And that's all, part of the reason why we're here today. Our PAC we formed our PAC 2 years ago to support the governor on the political side of stuff. And we've carried that over to what we're utilizing it for today. Our PAC's big and main thing for us is to support Governor Joe Lombardo and his agenda. So I want to get into some of the nitty gritty of kind of what we're here to do. But essentially, we are building an apparatus that we can use long term to be able to help, one, promote Joe Lombardo and his friendlies and allies, and make sure that we are doing our part in the Senate and the Assembly. I think it's no misnomer to anybody here that we are at a disadvantage in the legislature. And I'll talk a little bit about where the governor's priority bills are at today as we sit, going into a deadline day down in Carson City, but also what we plan to do post-session and how we can utilize and help each other out to be effective and to be successful again on a statewide level in 2024. I brought some notes here. Every governor in the state of Nevada gets 5 priority bills. What we did is we essentially looked at a statewide poll, which gave us the top issues for the state and what those things looked like and what Nevadans really cared about. This governor is basically built his entire agenda around what's important to Nevadans, because what he ran on and what he cares about is the betterment of all Nevadans and how we can make Nevada a better place education-wise, make sure our schools are getting back on the map, that crime is being reduced, that we have voter ID, things like that that are really important to the state. So when we polled these issues, we came up with the 5 different priority bills that he introduced to the legislature. The first one being AB 330, which was the Safer and Supportive Schools Act. For us, this addresses student behavior, discipline, and dangerous behavior while restoring teachers' ability to improve the learning environment of their classrooms. This bill was sent to the Senate for a hearing after it was in the Assembly. It passed in the Assembly in the work session to go to the Senate, and the Senate has yet to schedule a hearing on it at this time. AB 330 is the only bill that is not exempt to the deadline, so if the Democrats do not hear it in the Senate today, it will die. This bill has been intended with all of the school violence that we've seen in Clark County, as well as in Northern Nevada and everywhere. The governor's made it very, very clear with his press conferences. He went to Valley High School and did a press conference with the teacher who was sexually assaulted, beaten, and thrown into a closet, left for whatever means may be. And yet the Democrats still will not give this bill a hearing for whatever reason is yet to be known. But that school safety polls, about 77% of the state wants that. So for us, and like I said at the beginning, our agenda is based around what the Nevadans want. So the fact that there are legislative issues with that, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to us. The other school bill that we proposed was AB 400, which was the Education Achievement and Opportunity and Accountability Act, school choice. The intention behind this bill was to expand opportunity scholarship opportunities, teacher pipelines, reinstate Read by 3, given our status, as well as address the critical labor shortage of educators in the state. That bill did get heard, but it has yet to be put up for a vote in either house. What they've done instead is there's been a couple bills sponsored by Angie Taylor and Bill Barry Axelrod that look eerily similar to the governor's bill that are getting pushed ahead of ours, with the intention that they could take the win on that. But the governor is very steadfast in making sure that AB 400 gets heard and that schools are able to do that. On the education front, the governor proposed to give $2 billion to public schools and $500 million to charter schools. The intention behind this bill or the intention behind that, why giving $2 billion to the public school system is one. He heard from educators and folks in the CCSD and other about what their biggest issue was, and it was always been funding. We all have our opinions on how education funding is being spent, but for us, that was something that he wanted to address, and basically said, if your biggest issue is money, here's $2 billion to fix the system, but if we don't increase our status in the next 2 years, then we are going to be making changes. So it's an accountability measure to make sure that if you have the money to do what you're supposed to do, that the job is going to get done and our education system is going to get fixed. We have yet to see where they are with that. That bill is not exempt. It is exempt, so it will not die today. We still have the remainder of the legislative session for that to be heard. Senate Bill 412 was our Crime Reduction Act, and that was intended to reverse soft-on crime policies that endangered the communities over the last years, as well as lowering the felony threshold. Right now, our threshold is $1,200 for it to be a felony. So you can steal from a store up to $1,199, and it's just a misdemeanor slap on the wrist. That is worse than California. So this bill was intended to do that. The Democrat leadership have not scheduled a hearing on this bill for important measures, and it will be they have given us indications that they will not hear this bill. So I just want to make it very, very clear. Well, let me finish with the last two bills as well, and we'll go into what my opinion is on it. But the next one was something that polled really, really well, over 70%, which was SB 431, the Government Modernization and Accountability Act. This is to restructure and refocus the state to provide an effective and functional government. We all know, and I'm sure in this room and the listeners on the line, government entities tend to not always work how they're supposed to. So restructuring those and making sure that the money is being allocated correctly and that it's being used efficiently with accountability measures is what the governor was aiming to do with this. That as well was heard in the Senate, but has not been gone up for a vote. So again, we are not getting anywhere on that bill as of right now. And then the last one, which is important to a lot of folks, especially on our side of the aisle, was SB 405, which is the Election Integrity Act. This rollbacks Sisolak's original AB 4 measure and AB 236 measure, which was to instill universal mail-in balloting in our state. To remove that, to instill a voter ID measure for voter identification in the state, as well as other election reforms. The Democrats held a press conference last week with Attorney General Ford and Speaker Yeager. They made the indication that voter ID is unconstitutional, even though it is legal in 36 out of 50 states, and they have absolutely no intention of hearing our bill. So what we do in response is hold accountability and let the governor do what his job is, and that's govern. Like I said before, the governor's agenda has been formulated to fit something that all Nevadans want, because that's what he cares about. And the fact that we have such a hard time with our Democratic legislative makeup that we can't even get hearings on some bills, that's unheard of. I'm not sure the statistic, but it's been a very, very long time that a governor has not gotten at least a hearing on his priority bills in the legislature. So what do we do about it? What's the PAC all about? We have a couple different entities that we utilize to be able to do what we want to do. But our real intention of this is the governor is going to be working very, very hard for Nevadans for the next 4 and hopefully 8 years. We wanted to create an operation that is a long-standing operation to help everyone along the way, from state and local races to obviously the governor's eventual reelect, and to be able to give everybody an opportunity to have a seat at the table and to try to build out where we all know that we've had issues in the past, things that we have taken into consideration but maybe not acted on as a party, and to be able to build that out. So for us, let me grab my note here. What does that look like? One of the things that our opponents have done very, very well over the years is they've recruited and trained and placed candidates in the proper places to run for office. Something that we intend to do is very, very similar. Theirs is called Emerge Nevada. There's female exclusive, ours will not be. But to start up an extensive recruitment operation for candidates and placing them in the right seats during the right time. The big thing for our party, and in my opinion, is that, everybody has the constitutional right to run for office, but is it always the best candidate? We tend to love primaries, and our primaries have gotten, quite frankly, nastier and nastier over the last elections. The governor wants to make sure that we're getting the right candidates in the right seats. And we're going to plan on doing that extensively, not just this time, but for longstanding going forward, and to help candidates and encourage candidates to be able to do what they need to do to win. We'll provide incentive programs to be able to, when you hit certain milestones, we'll be able to provide things like voter contact tools, funding, things like that, governor's endorsements, things like that for the candidates that choose to work with our program and our apparatus. But that's just one of the many things for us. The other thing that we want to do is to make sure that we are effectively communicating what the governor is doing at any given time. And that starts with making sure that we have the ear and the voice of average Nevadans having a clear line of communication to the governor's office. We tend sometimes, and with our legislative makeup, with how, if the other side doesn't get anything through the legislature, they're ineffective. If the governor doesn't get anything through either, he can be proven ineffective. So there is going to always be compromise, and we're no misnomer to that with principle. I think the governor has made it very clear, especially after 2 days ago when he vetoed those unconstitutional gun bills that were done. And we just want to make sure that we're communicating why he's doing what he's doing on a timely fashion. Whether that's if we need to talk to, folks in mining or in farming or in hospitality or whatever it may be. We know that in the last administration, from what we understood, they didn't do a good job of explaining what they were doing. And we want to make sure that the governor's as transparent as possible and everyone has a seat at the table. So that's definitely a big part of it. One of the things that is kind of our big focus right now, and if you guys all have Twitter, which I'm assuming you all do, make sure to follow our Better Nevada War Room. The War Room is our tool that we've used for one, to be able to hold our opponents accountable, to be able to act on a rapid response level to the things that are going on in the legislature and abroad, as well as a way for us to be able to provide more communications efforts and bring light to the media of the things that are going on behind the scenes and the things that we want to be doing. That tool for us will be an ongoing thing, making sure that all of those tools and that everyone has a good, clear understanding on where the governor stands, and as well as where the governor's having snags with the legislature and so on, are really going to be something that we want to be able to utilize. And the next thing is we understand that long-term, the way that I always like to put it is, in my opinion, from my experience in politics, is every time we get a little bit of water in our cup and we lose, we throw our water out and try to start new. Every time our opponents have lost, they don't dump out their water, they just add to it every single time, and they've built a quite successful and functional apparatus to utilize against us. Our intention with the Better Nevada PAC, as well as our C4, which is the Service First Fund, is to be able to provide that opportunity on our side, which is something that we think has been needed for a very long time and something that has been absent in our party. So that's really what we're here to do today. I'm happy to answer questions. I know that we're going to be answering questions and Q&As coming up very soon.
I have a couple of questions for you before we start on the Q&A. Is that all right, Ray? Yeah. Okay. So first of all, when you go to betternevadapac.com, there are some polls that you've taken that are very relative to some of the bills that have been introduced. Do you want to discuss some of those, especially the one on election reform?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, one of the things that we initially wanted to do was to get a good understanding of what Nevadans cared about and what their big issues were, and that's how this administration wanted to prioritize legislative session. So your average poll that you would see is usually like 200 to 300 responses. Ours was 10 times more than that, with the intention that we were getting a clear and accurate understanding of what we're doing and what Nevadans really cared about. Over 70% of Nevadans want voter ID. and want accountability measures placed. So that's why we made it a priority with this administration to be able to do that. And it also, on the campaign trail, the governor promised that if he got elected, he would listen to all Nevadans, especially Republicans on our side, whether you supported him in the primary or not. And this is definitely one of the things that we wanted to make sure that was on the forefront, and that we were following what Nevadans want, which is safe and secure elections.
And if I can point out that if you go to the website, you're going to also see that this is broken down by demographics. So it's not just this number of people. It's actually broken down by how many Hispanics and the different demographics that are available, nonpartisans. So take a look at that. Go to betternevadapac.com and check it out. It's showing up on our screen here. If you're on Facebook, you can see it. Joe, do you want to talk a little bit about the voter ID and how important that is?
Yeah, so, for us, it's no misnomer that apathy has definitely been a huge part of our state. And I think after the 2022 election, when our elections weren't called until 7 days after, especially with some of the bills or part of the bill that was introduced that allowed mail ballots to be received 4 days after the election, as long as they were postmarked by election day. And to our credit, with our candidates like Adam Laxalt were up by 35,000 votes and Joe Lombardo by 50,000 votes on election night. And I think all Nevadans saw, and not even just in Nevada, but nationwide, the slow deterioration of what mail ballots do and how important it would be. I mean, you all know this. I remember watching elections. I'm not very old, but even just going back 10 to 12 years, and by 9 o'clock, 9:30, you kind of know the outcome of an election. The fact that we have laws now that diminish confidence in our elections is not something that we enjoy, and not something that I think anybody in the country would enjoy. And the fact that we were able to still win with Governor Joe Lombardo with that is put a highlight on our opponents, that no one wants to wait 7 days for the results to come in. So voter ID for us, like I said, is very, very important. It's pretty standard. I mean, you go into any 7-Eleven to buy pretty much anything, and they're going to ask you for your ID. We think it's only fair that we make sure that we're checking voter ID when people go to vote, not just your address and your signature, like it states in the law now.
Excellent. Excellent. We're going to have to take a break here pretty quick, but we probably have a little bit of time for a question if somebody has one. Okay, we got about 4 minutes. So yeah, we do have some time. You want to go ahead, Ricky?
I do. We have same-day voting and registering. How is it possible that you can count that vote on the same day or within the 2 days without verifying that they're a U.S. citizen and a legal resident of the state of Nevada, and then count that vote? How is that possible to do that?
That's a good question. Same-day voter registration, the last 2 elections, ironically, has helped and benefited. We've had more Republicans register the same day and vote the same day than the Democrats did. The accountability measure that's put in place for automatic voter registration and same-day voter registration is you have to provide 30-day proof of residence, with the intent that you can't vote at 8 a.m. in Sacramento and drive to Reno and vote at noon. So the accountability measures are actually even more stringent with same-day voter registration for us, and it's actually benefited us. Not in a large swath, but overall, same-day voter registration has been a benefit, an added benefit to Republicans.
So then how did Cortez Masto win the election over Adam Laxalt? It was this county that turned out for Mastos, wasn't it?
Yep. Yeah, so Cortez Masto did win Washoe and Clark counties. And Adam lost Clark County, I believe, by about 8%. So, I mean, this is just from my historic knowledge of the state, and this is my personal opinion, not the PAC's opinion, just to be clear. But
no, that's fine.
In Washoe County, as you know, we had operations like Tesla, Panasonic, Google, Apple all coming to Washoe Valley and moving out to USA Parkway. I remember in 2016, after the election, we polled a lot of the Washoe County residents that were coming into the state, and they were mentioning that they elected bad Democrats in California and they're going to elect better ones here. How you change that narrative is up to the candidate. How you can make your case to like suburban women voters, which is a large population in Washoe to Clark, is all very, very, very important.
We're going to have to take a break here. You're listening to America Matters Media. Okay, we got to go. We still have a minute or so, so I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. The thing about where we're at with elections, and especially with the mail ballots, and you asked how did Cortez Masto beat Adam Laxalt? It all came down to mail ballots. So when we were doing our statistical analysis of how mail ballots were breaking, whether they were dropped off on election day or if they were coming in through the post office, Washoe County, when we looked at who was voting for who, that came to a polling site and dropped a mail ballot on election day, it was 50-50. 50% Republican, 50% Democrat. So when it came to the Democrats in Clark County, it was breaking 65%.
And on that note, we're going to take a break.
Talking to Victor from Precision Diamonds. Victor, I remember you in the old days, Park Lane Mall, a kiosk. It's a lot different now, isn't it?
Man, that was a long time ago. 1988, we've been blessed that we've been guided, and finally we have bought an amazing building across the street from the convention center. We found a better way to serve you. You know, we call it home. We managed to create amazing energy. And when we say welcome to the family, boy, we really mean it.
It is a family affair.
Absolutely. And we couldn't have done it without our wonderful customers who believed in us for all of 27 years. So I'm here to really say thanks to all of our wonderful
I didn't mention that part, so that's good.
They're
cast as
customers.
Ballots, so
but now we know each other's children and grandchildren.
All those years ago, a little kiosk in Park Lane Mall. Park Lane Mall is not there anymore, but you are still here.
Yeah, we have solidified our future by buying this beautiful building on Virginia Street. So we're there to serve you.
Thank you, Victor. Precision Diamonds, your local jeweler across from the convention center.
Businesses, writers, check this out. Go to lrpnv.com to get your printing, publishing, and professional services today. Need a virtual office? A place to receive and forward your mail with professional address and suite number for your business? Someone to answer your telephones? Want to rent a conference room for only $15 an hour? What about that book you've been wanting to have printed? LRP Printing and Business Center can do it for you, and they have a professional assistant on site daily, Monday through Friday. Just call 775-356-1004. Need copies, business cards, invoices, books, booklets, or graphic design to help brand you or your business? Just call 775-356-1004 or go to lrpnv.com. With a great selection of new and used books, you can get your printing done and a book to entertain you in your time off. And don't forget, you could have your business sponsoring the Bookhound Radio Show, just like Andrew Martoni, author of Little Man in the Map, does every week. Just go to lrpnv.com. That's lrpnv.com or call 775-356-1004. They'll provide solutions for your business and writing projects.
To join the conversation, call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255.
Welcome back. This is America Matters Media. I'm Janice Hermson. I'm your host, standing in for Eddie Floyd. And we are talking to Joe Weaver of the Better Nevada PAC. He's been giving us some great information about what Governor Lombardo is doing and the current legislation, the bills that have come before, and some of the outcomes of that. Right now, I think we'd like to take some questions from our audience here in the Reno Town Mall. Okay, go right ahead, Ray. Ray's going to ask a question. This is Ray Rocha.
Yeah, Joe, there's a bill right now from the crazy Democrats that want to, I have it on, $14 million for the kids to buy lunch, breakfast, and all that. Whatever happened to the old day of, if you have kids, take care of them yourself instead of us paying for it. I just did that on Facebook.
Right. I mean, all I can say personally is I agree with you. But as far as where the administration stands on the status of that bill and if it'll be signed or not, I don't have that information. Yeah.
Joe, hi, thank you. When we are told to go online and register our opinion at every bill down at the bottom, it says your opinion, and then you click on it and you got that little pie where you say yes or no. And most of the bills I saw that the Republicans were for, the most of the people on that site were for, and very few against. Obviously, that doesn't make a difference with the Democrats. Do they look at that at all? Because it's their constituents that are entering their opinion.
Right.
Joe, if I could just step in and just explain to our audience what she was talking about. There's a website called Nellis, and on Nellis you go in and you're able to kind of put your own little vote in there and a comment if you want to, and the legislators will take a look at that. So a lot of times the bills are showing up that anyone who's at least commented is opposed, and yet it doesn't seem that matters. So go ahead.
Yeah, so being able to voice your opinion on the Nellis website is really, really important. What it does for an apparatus like us, and if you go back on our Twitter account at Better Nevada PAC, you can see that we utilize this information a lot. It's a good way to continue to push back, especially with what I talked about earlier. 77% of the state supports school safety. If you go to the opinions page, it's like 400 opinions for and 60 against. It's a pretty easy way for us to make our case. Whether they want to obstruct or not is their prerogative, and we know where they've been right now, which is not supporting it. It takes an army to be able to do this, right? And that's really the intention of what we're trying to do here. And I'm glad you brought up Nellis and the opinions on it too, because we've seen an overwhelming amount of support from a lot of the different groups and our volunteers and activists calling in to testify, making their case to the legislature. It's not something that, in my opinion, following the legislature, they have really seen in force as they have now. A lot of that is due to groups like this and groups like ours who are advocating and asking individuals to do that. But it's also good to tell your friends and your family and your coworkers or whoever that you are able to do that. Like the legislature is a citizen legislature. Anybody can walk into that building at any time and talk to any legislator they want. No questions asked. It's the people's building. So making your voice heard and being able to make sure that you reach out, email your representatives, because as we all know, we can sit back all day long and be armchair quarterbacks and complain about it. But the easiest way to do something about it, especially since it's only 6 months every other year with a biennial session, is to be active with the legislature. I can guarantee you that they see what you're saying. Whether they take it into consideration or not, it's a different thing. But with overwhelming support and pushback from all of you, compromises can be made and have been made so far based on what they're hearing from folks at the legislature, just not as much as we would like, of course.
So Joe, my question to you would be, for those folks that have been doing this, a lot of them are getting really frustrated. They're going in, they're writing letters, they're giving testimony, they're doing everything they can do, and yet they're still seeing us basically fail, is kind of how you feel, right? So, and I know you're saying that there has been an effect. What do you say to the folks to keep them motivated and to keep them moving forward?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And like I said, it really does make a difference, and it is discouraging. Look, 2 years ago when we had full Democrat legislature, we felt a lot less useless as we did now. But as long as you continue to stand up for what you believe in and continue to talk about it, it really is going to make a difference long term. Elections are not won by one individual or one campaign or any dollar amount of money spent. It's about how you can mobilize grassroots, ask appropriate questions, and convey our message. If we have volunteers who are educated and talking reasonably to folks and having engaging conversations, it's really easy for us as a party to use the buzzwords. Our opponents have used the court of public opinion against us, right? It's very easy to want to bite back per se. But the more educated that we get and the more that we know about what our legislative system is doing and how our representatives are voting, if we live in districts that are not favorable to us, the more that we can communicate to folks and try to get more folks elected. The governor's team is going to be asking a lot of everybody for the next 2 years. Like I said, with the legislature now, that's been our main focus, but it's not going to take, one person can't do it, and he's going to fight every single day for all of Nevadans, and we really, really appreciate everything we've seen so far, and he will be an advocate for you if you're an advocate for him.
Okay, Nicholas St. John from the Washoe Patriots has a question.
I have a couple of them. One, I believe that the governor has, to some degree, the ability to do similar to executive orders. Is there some talk about some executive orders that he can do to curtail some of the onerous or nefarious things that are going on in our elections? One of the questions I have is, in our S code, it says that you cannot release any tallies until the last vote is cast. And the question has arisen on 2 different definitions of the word cast. So I'll let you answer that one, then I've got a second one.
Sure. So I'm going to try to answer this to my best ability. Obviously, the governor does have executive order power. From my understanding, I could be a little bit wrong, is I don't know if executive orders can override constitutional law. And since election integrity is into constitutional law in this state, the way that it was written, I might have to do some research to see if you can executive override some of that stuff. I don't know if you can personally. But I know that the governor's team is willing to do whatever it takes to get some of this stuff done. I can't say for sure that, a good way to make our voice heard and try to get some of this stuff done, there's always an option to do a ballot initiative for a voter ID or to do stuff like that to get that stuff on the ballot. It's what they've currently done to us with ranked choice voting passed last year. That's going to be on the ballot again this year. In 2016, they put the legalization of marijuana on the ballot. Stuff like that. As far as elections go, any individual or entity can put things on the ballot with the right amount of signatures. That's definitely one way to get things changed constitutionally. But again, back to my first point, I'm not 100% sure if an executive order can override Nevada Constitution. I would assume not.
And my second question deals with organizations. We have a tendency, especially in the government, to throw money at things, thinking that's going to solve the issue. If we go back to 1964, we've thrown some $19 trillion at the poor, and it's not any better. For you guys who run a PAC, I'd like to talk to you guys more about things like what we've come up with about I Can Write 10, where we sent out 1,000 letters to people who are, it looked like they had given up. We don't know. We didn't have the stats on it for how many actually we got out to vote. But there's several options you can do to make the money go a lot further. Correct. And to get a bigger impact. And so do you guys have some of those plans in place? Would you share some of those ideas with us now while we're here?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up. One of the things too that we're really going to be focusing on, especially on that, is there's a lot of really great organizations, C3s, C4s, PACs, all doing what they think is best for this state in this state that definitely benefit the Republican Party in general. We want to make sure that we're not just another one of those that's doing our own thing and not listening to anybody. The governor wants to make sure, and how the other side has been so effective is they lockstep in unity and make sure that they're not reinventing the wheel every single time or throwing a bunch of money or sending a mailer on the same day, whatever it may be. So we want to talk to and utilize and work with all of the third-party organizations to make sure that we're finding some cohesive unit and communication. So that way we're not, again, like you mentioned, not duplicating efforts or making sure the money is being spent or utilizing each other as resources to make sure that we're doing things the way that we think it should be done. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
I just want to remind everyone you're listening to America Matters Media. We are heard on Radio for America, AUN TV, and the Salem Network. And now we have a question from Ricky Harold of Military Matters.
Yeah, Joe, one of the questions that comes up is, and I'll give you an example. In the last election in 2022, there was a lot of good flyers that people put out who were candidates for elective office. And those flyers came out to my home 3 days after the election was over, okay? So I don't know who's running those programs, but whoever's doing it is not effective. If you're giving out elective flyers in somebody's bio and why we should vote for them, and they come 3 days after the election, it's meaningless. Yeah. And I noticed that all of the Democrats came out 2 weeks before the election. Most of the Republicans came right at the end or after the election. So there's a disconnect here in our party. So that's just a statement. That's not a question. My question is, when we look at the legislature, and you talked about executive action over here by St. John, Sisolak had no problem doing that. All right. He did it extensively, and he used the pandemic as his anvil. Not any of it was constitutional, and that's a fact. Sure. So if Joe Lombardo needs to do something executive-wise, I don't see any reason he can't do anything that the past governor did, and then let the legislature take it to court. But in the meantime, have an action that impacts on our people.
I agree with you there. On your first question, mail is not sent by just one person. There's different companies that send mail, a lot of them. There is a lot of good national firms or firms that hire folks. And it comes down to political strategy too, right? Like, in my opinion, when I run races, like, you should be sending mail before mail ballots hit. Our elections start 3 weeks early here because everyone gets a mail ballot. You should probably know who your candidate is before that with digital and mail, and kind of, you got early vote, and you can also go by voter too. There's a lot of data to show, like, if you don't vote by mail, I don't need to send a mailer to your door 3 weeks before, unless we're having an ID problem, a problem with name recognition. So that's all a political game. So whoever was sending those mailers 3 days out, they didn't hire a good vendor. I mean, it's not cheap. I promise you that. 45 cents.
Oh, I know
a
it's
mailer.
not cheap.
So that's all really important. And then I'll address your second question in a second.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to the integrity of our elections, we have all witnessed an avalanche of malfeasance in this state and across the country. What can Joe do, or what can our party do to change that in a material way for the next election? We can't change the past, but by gosh, by golly, we can do something for the next election to make it a fair and above board. So everyone in this room can say, even if we lost or we won, it was fair.
I completely agree with you, and the governor absolutely believes in that. That's why SB 405 exists with all of its parameters, is to make sure that everything is changed and all of the issues that we've seen over the last 4 years mainly, are fixed. Again, I go back to the legislative makeup. It's very, very tough to do with a super minority in the Assembly and a minority in the Senate with just one seat flipped to override any veto. So for what the governor can do is to try to propose this bill, and we're going to continue to put pressure on these legislators to try to give it to us. The Attorney General of the state of Nevada saying it's unconstitutional is just hogwash, if you ask me. What can we do about it? Get more Republicans elected so we can get stuff passed. It's really all about, we can talk about how upset we are at how election results are, or things that we didn't like that happened. But unless we do a better job as a party, as a community, as a precinct, as a county party, as a state party, as a national party, to be able to understand where we can make inroads and win seats back, that's how we get our seat at the table. Having a Republican governor is obviously a godsend compared to everything that could be bad. He has the option to veto that. But how we can fix election systems, Governor Joe Lombardo is trying to do that right now. Again, it's tough to be able to do that otherwise. I do take note of what you said before, and I'll make sure that stuff is addressed as well, and they know that the concerns are there.
Okay, we have another question.
Hi, you just brought up the topic about that within Nevada, our Republican/conservative party isn't always in tandem, and we saw that a lot in the Laxalt Cortez Masto. What is the governor planning on doing, and the governor's office, as far as better uniting our party so we're not tripping each other up?
So his response to all of those issues, and there's always going to be quorums, right? I mean, all of us are part of some group that doesn't like another, or we don't always agree with stuff, right? I'd love if we use the Reagan rule every once in a while. If we agree 80% of the time, we agree all the time. We just don't. But what we can do to combat that and to try to form some more unity is do things like start a PAC that goes to Republican meetings and talks about how we can unify together and tries to meet with different organizations and do that. That's what we're doing. We are our PAC and our different organizations are your answer. That's what we're trying to do, is to try to bridge the gap between where there may be differences in the party and try to show that there's one formal unit that is trying to better our party and our state every single day. And if folks want to help us with that, we're happy to help them in return, and so be it. So the answer to your question is why I'm here today.
All right, Bill, go right ahead.
On these. So I'm using on the other end of the microphone here. So I just want to thank everybody for coming out here today. The potential for this forum is huge. If we could get Joe, I just sort of, as you're back there thinking, we've been doing this for 3 or 4 months. And if we could do a shout out or a community town hall forum like this, it'd be incredible. So it's very, very good. It just needs to be produced a little bit more. People who are in this area would be trained ahead of time and then get your timing down. But we've been working on these remotes for a while to test them in other places. I want to thank you for coming. You did a really good job. But I do have a couple of questions too. And I may have missed it while I was engineering. The biggest thing is on getting out the vote is we had 140,000 Republicans who didn't vote because they were promoted and everyone's saying to go vote at the polls. As much as we don't like the mail ballot, it works. You can get that in, you can harvest that. And we need to do that. So what are our plans on your side to get out the vote by getting them to vote early? I voted by mail a couple days out. My wife voted at the polls and my friend voted. It took him 3 hours to vote on election day. So that's the first question. And then the second question is being in RedMove, this is RedMove events. We did the governor's debate last year and I'm big into debates because I think the more that the Republicans debate and talk, the better they get. So when they win the primary, they can just terrorize the Democrat because they've already been debating and out there. So I really suggest that we get a lot of debates at all levels more often. And that's what we do at RedMove. We put debates, we live stream like Trump did early on in his process. So I'll let you answer that one about the getting out the vote.
Yeah, so I get asked this question a lot, especially, running the national program last year in the presidential election. I mean, a lot of people ask us, about ballot harvesting, and voting by mail has been a very apathetic thing for our party. It has not been easy to, my main goal in 2022 was to try to educate voters early that, it's an option. It's something that's important. As far as ballot harvesting, we tried it. And we continue to try it. We had a little over 80 different locations that we had passive voter registration efforts at, as well, from gun stores to Republican-owned businesses or whatever it may be, saying like, you can drop your ballot off here. It's legal now, right? So we should do it. And my team, we knocked on over 1.5 million physical doors last year. Whenever we would go to the door and ask Republicans, like, hey, how do you plan to vote? If they said, I'm just going to mail it, we would say things like, would you like us, like a trusted member of the Republican Party to secure your ballot for you? I'm going to pivot real quick because I think it's important, but I'll ask the group this question too, because I think it's really important. If I was to come to your door as a Republican, let's just say it's election day, and I say, hey, can I have your ballot? What are you going to tell me? Nope. Do we anticipate that Republicans in Nevada feel the same way that you do? Probably. Which is why with all the efforts that we did, I mean, we didn't collect that many, 500-600. So we have to be able to educate our voters that it's an option. How we do that is going to be up to everybody in this room and our organization on how we do that, because voting by mail is an option. We need to be able to do it. Or have we tried ballot harvesting? Absolutely. We need to do a better job at it. But again, this room agrees it's not something that's very beloved by our party to do it. We can't expect Republicans to want to give us our ballot if we won't, right? But there has to be an educational point in the meantime.
Okay, we have another question. Make sure you turn on your mic.
You've had one for a while.
Okay. Could you, thank you, by the way, for giving us this information. Could you comment, thank God that it's been vetoed, but comment on it's called the nationwide popular vote. So then regardless of how Nevadans vote, if this, and it did pass through the legislature, but it was vetoed by Governor Lobato. Could you just comment on that? Because this is very dangerous, because it's saying, my understanding is that whatever the nation's popular vote is, that's the way our electoral vote has to go, regardless of if we voted Republican. But if last couple times, or last time it was, 2 times ago, Clinton won the popular vote, and I could comment on that. But could you just comment on that? And because it passed the legislature.
Yeah. So AJR 6 is what you're referring to, which was the national popular vote. Unfortunately, the governor cannot veto that because it's a constitutional amendment. So it did pass in the legislature yesterday. There was one Democratic senator that did not vote for it, Senator Dean O'Neill. So it will unfortunately be going to the ballot. My personal opinion, not on the PAC side, it's a way to subvert the Electoral College, and I don't think anybody thinks that that's okay. So yeah, AJR 6 is a constitutional amendment. So it has to pass the ballot in 2024 and 6 to be instituted by 28 if it passes. So there's opportunities to stop it.
Okay, we have another question.
I have a question about whether or not there will be a communications and media blitz to educate Republican voters about what type of voting they can do and encourage them that banking your vote ahead through absentee ballots, which are just mail-in ballots, is a very good way to secure the vote is turned out, even though they are risk averse with anyone coming to their door to collect a ballot. But there could be some good messaging developed around educating our side on how to get over those hurdles. Is that part of your plan?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think it's very, very important that we do a better job of educating our voters on why it's important to vote. Like I said earlier, there has been a lot of apathy within our party based on, 2020 election results. And a lot of it is, we understand it. And it's quite frankly, makes sense. But again, at least from our standpoint, yes, well, especially since I'm running everything political for this PAC, that's definitely one of our options. And, there's soon to be a lot of stuff that we'll try to do down the road as we get this thing off the road. But yeah, we need to do a better job.
Okay, Nicole, you have a question?
Yeah, Joe, thanks for coming here. And I think you've enlightened us with a number of misconceptions on our part. I would like to know what your PAC is going to do on ranked choice voting. And even though the Democrats don't like it, my fear is that a lot of people think it's a better option. And so have you mapped out what it's going to look like if ranked choice voting passes? And how does our party go forward? And I think if you map that out and explain it to people now or what it's going to look like, they're going to start thinking. The other comment is, I believe the abortion issue is still high on everyone's mind, even though in Nevada it's already been set. So those are kind of informational conceptions. And I like to know what your PAC's going to be doing about it.
Sure. All I can really comment on now is we know it's definitely on our radar. What we plan to do with that or not do with that is to be determined. On your second portion of your question, well, I'm trying to find the best way to say it because we are live. We'll have a conversation after this because I think there is a couple of good points of what you're talking about and things that we intend to look at. So we'll talk about it then.
Well, that's an interesting answer. Yeah, I was going to say, that does sound like a politician. Are you running? All right. Joe Weaver, I want to thank you so much with Better Nevada PAC. Do you have a final comment? We got just about a minute or so.
Yeah, so if you want to follow along with what we're doing and be a part of our program, betternevadapac.com is where you can sign up. That's where you'll start to get our weekly updates or biweekly updates that we do. You can follow our Twitter account at betternevadapac. That's where our rapid response things go. That's where we do have a lot of fun, and we get elected officials to respond back to us. It's kind of fun to do. And just keep in touch. I'll make sure that if anybody wants to get involved with what the governor's doing, it's going to take an army to do it. And we welcome everybody at the table to be able to help us. And we want to help everybody. This state is very important to all of us. Most of us who are working on this are from Nevada. Obviously the governor cares a lot about Nevada, and we want to make sure that everything that you have a clear line of communication and transparency with the administration through our PAC. So we hope that you join us.
We
never, not never.
All right. Well, we thank you, Joe Weaver, for joining us today, and we appreciate you taking the time. You've been listening to America Matters Media. I'm Janice Hermson, and we're on Radio for America, AUN TV, 1060 AM, and the Salem Network. So thank you so much for being with us. RedMove Nevada, thank you for what you guys do, and we're out.
Well, Jason, I've got to tell you, you're pretty much everything this company is looking for in an entry-level candidate.
Great.
Your resume isn't quite what we're used to, but you've got a fantastic work ethic.
Thank you.
And I'm impressed